Did you know that some of the biggest alien enthusiasts have set off into space themselves? No wonder. In the view of the frightening things that NASA astronauts have seen in space, the question of the existence of extraterrestrial life seems to have long since found a disturbing answer. Be honest, how would you react if you saw something grotesque out there that made you question your own sanity? If your breath caught in fire, and then it knocked on your spaceship from outside, would you dare tell the world about your incredible experiences? And more importantly, would anyone believe you? In view of such prominent names as Yuri Gagarin and Neil Armstrong, we quickly forget that the foundations of manned space travel were actually laid by animals. And we don't just mean the famous dog Laika, because 10 years before the pitiful four-legged friend was launched into space, a swarm of fruit flies had already scratched the boundary to space. Other animal space test subjects include microbes, cats, mice, monkeys, and turtles. And in fact, the US astronaut Story Musgrave also claims to have spotted some kind of animal on his space dives, with the small but crucial difference that it was apparently not from Earth. Musgrave was in the service of NASA between 1967 and 1997. He completed a total of 6 space flights and is the only astronaut to have set off into space on all 5 space shuttles. However, Musgrave is best remembered by the public for 2 disturbing experiences, which he described as follows. On 2 missions, and I still can't explain why, I saw a snake out there. It was between 1.8 and 2.5 meters long and seemed kind of rubbery because it had inner waves. The snake followed me for quite a long time. The more you fly in space, the more incredible things you see out there. And that just gives you the certainty that there are other creatures out there. Some are rather primitive, very simple single-celled organisms, but others are advanced civilizations that have existed for millions of years. They do things that we can't even imagine. Did the Apollo 11 crew see a UFO? July 20, 1969 is forever immortalized in our history books because, as we all know, this was the day when one small step for a man was enough to turn us into a species that travels to foreign celestial bodies. However, 55 years after the first visit to the moon, the Apollo 11 mission continues to divide the world public into 2 camps. Those who see the moon landing as the greatest success in the history of manned space travel, and those who see it as the biggest fraud of all time. However, anyone thinking of confronting Buzz Aldrin with theories about large-scale conspiracies and secret film sets in Area 51 had better be prepared for his quick-witted response. When Aldrin was once insulted by filmmaker Bart Sibrel as a liar and a fraud, he gave him a punch in the jaw that was quite something. And yet, even the former Apollo astronaut can't help but admit that a very strange incident took place back then that still haunts him to this day. During the prestigious mission, Aldrin and his 2 companions saw something they simply could not make sense of. A strange L-shaped object, a kind of light that appeared to be moving parallel to them. In fact, the trio were reluctant to report the observation in Houston, because according to Aldrin, the mission would probably have been aborted if the ominous object had turned out to be an alien spaceship. Instead, the astronauts beat around the bush and asked, tellingly, how far away the 3rd stage of the Saturn V rocket, the so-called SIVB, was. And although Aldrin describes the sighting in purely objective terms as unidentified, he admits that there are also explanations for it, whose roots do not necessarily lie in another world. The ex-space traveler is quoted as follows. It could have been the rocket we had separated from, or one of the 4 apertures that fell off the moment we pulled the lander out of the final stage, reflecting the sunlight. The following quote from Aldrin, however, leaves no doubt about his assessment of the subject of extraterrestrial life. There could be aliens in our Milky Way, and there are billions of other galaxies besides it. There is almost certainly other life somewhere in the universe. This statement by Neil Armstrong turns our worldview upside down. Some believe in God, others believe in nothing at all, and still others are firmly convinced that the cultures of antiquity were regularly visited by aliens and significantly influenced by them. Maurice Chadelin was also an ardent supporter of so-called pre-astronautics. And if you want to delve deeper into the former NASA employee's world of thought, you can stick your nose into his book, Our Cosmic Ancestors. However, the links between extraterrestrials and the Egyptian pyramids are by no means the only unusual claims with which Chatelaine has attracted attention. In Our Cosmic Ancestors, the reader also learns that Neil Armstrong experienced something on the moon that was so shocking that it has been canceled from all of us ever since. During the historic moon landing, which was watched by more than 500 million television viewers, the radio link to Earth was lost for around 2 minutes. Officially, this was purely technical, but unofficially, some NASA employees overheard the unbelievable words that Neil Armstrong uttered during this time. According to them, the visibly distraught space traveler whispered, "These babies are huge, sir, gigantic. Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you. There are other spaceships out here, lined up on the other side of the crater. They're on the moon, and they're watching us." We never found out what that was. James McDevitt's professional career got off to an unusual start, to say the least. Although the American had never seen the inside of a cockpit before, he applied to the Air Force as a pilot in 1951, and 14 years later found himself in command on board Gemini 4. As part of the mission, Ed White became the first American to complete a spacewalk, and yet his colleague's milestone was by no means the most memorable memory McDevitt took back to Earth. Because let's be honest, what is a 20-minute stay outside the space capsule compared to a real UFO? In the aftermath, the perplexed space traveler summarized his observations as follows. During the Gemini 4 mission of 1965, I saw an object very close to our spacecraft that I could not identify. To me, it looked most like the stage of another rocket. I tried to photograph it, but unfortunately the photos didn't turn out. We never found out what it was. However, the ground radar data showed that there shouldn't have been any other object there. What triggered this eerie knocking? Anyone who studies the history of Chinese space travel cannot avoid the name Yang Liwei. After all, on October 15, 2003, he became the first Chinese ever to break the shackles of our blue home planet. And even today, more than 20 years after the successful first flight, the Shenzhou 5 mission is still the focus of heated debate. This has the simple but uncanny background that Yang Liwei heard something back then that, strictly speaking, should not have existed. After all, in the eerie silence of space, sound should actually be an impossibility. After all, sound needs a medium to propagate. But despite all the laws, the astronaut later claimed to have heard a frightening knocking sound inside the spaceship. To be more precise, it sounded as if someone, or should we say something, hitting a piece of iron with a mallet. Both alarmed and confused, Yang Liwei immediately tried to identify the source of the noise, but there was nothing there. A look outside revealed only the gigantic expanse of space. So we still have no choice but to speculate about the true background of the incident. And as if this event wasn't spooky enough, other Chinese space travelers later also claimed to have heard similar noises. The mysterious moon music is still polarizing today. To understand what is meant by this, here is an excerpt from the conversation between astronauts Eugene Cernan, Thomas Stafford, and John Young in May 1969. "Did you hear that whistle too?" "Yes, it sounds like, well, space music. Isn't that strange?" "Yes, I hear it too. I was about to go and see if there was anyone out there." "Boy, that's some strange music. We have to find out what it is. Nobody's going to believe us." Originally, the astronaut trio had set off for the moon to set the course for the first manned moon landing. The aim of the Apollo 10 mission was to test the descent, ascent, approach, and docking maneuvers under real conditions. And while the mission was a complete success in retrospect, the question of what the men really heard back then still fuels the wildest speculation today. This is despite the fact that the official side has long since provided a very unspectacular explanation for the mysterious moon music. If you follow NASA's claims, the strange sounds were simply based on interference between the command module's radio equipment and the lunar module. However, the skeptical camp is not so easily fobbed off, and poses another question in this regard. If the incident was really as common as it is claimed, why were the corresponding recordings kept under lock and key for decades? Fortunately, you don't have to keep your like and subscription under lock and key. Love learning about the most extraordinary incidents and observations in space? Then press subscribe now and never miss a video on this exciting topic again. Craziest things you cannot do in space. The idea of living in space is exciting, appealing, and just a little bit frightening. Who wouldn't want to be up there with the stars just an arm's length away? But it's all fun and games until you realize that even the simplest tasks we can perform on Earth, like brushing our teeth or using the toilet, are not quite simple in space due to the lack of gravity. Take a walk. Because of evolution, human beings have just enough weight to exist successfully in Earth's gravity. We can stand, walk, run, jump, throw, sit, and lie down after a long day. We can reach for things and even stumble when we hit something. We can also lift objects and keep them back in place. But travel just a little bit outside of Earth and all of our warm, fuzzy gravity is gone. Once an astronaut enters space, the balance of our atmosphere on Earth departs quickly, and the astronaut has to float through everything. Things as simple as stepping out for a little walk become a thing they can only wish for, and unless they are strapped down, they can only float everywhere. To go out of their spaceship, they have to get strapped into full breathing gear to allow them to survive in the darkness of space. To say the least, astronauts forget about moving their legs as they do on Earth. Use the toilet. When nature calls, you have no choice but to respond, right? Down on Earth, we take going to the toilet for granted because we all know we all have a place to do is sit and do our business with ease. But take a trip to space and everything switches up really fast. When you start thinking about the fact that astronauts have to undergo special training to use the toilet in space, then you know it's a really big deal. In space, the absence of our dear gravity makes going to the John chaotic. To use the bathroom, astronauts must strap themselves to the seat as securely as they would if they were about to jump off a mountain. Then they use a specially designed seat for solid waste and a liquid waste vacuum tube with different sized funnels for men and women. They don't want to risk floating up in the middle of their business, which is probably the least awkward thing that could happen. Even worse is the risk of a brown intruder drifting around the space station and getting stuck to people's hair, clothes, or important machinery. So you know it has to be locked down tight. Write with a regular pen. A popular myth that you might or might not have heard is that in the past, at the height of the space race between the US and the Soviet Union to reach the moon, Americans discovered their regular pens would not work in space. As the story goes, Americans then spent huge sums of money developing a special pen, while the Soviet counterparts used pencils to write. But this story is not entirely true. The Russians used specially created pencils to write in space. In contrast, Americans used markers until an inventor named Paul Fisher developed a specially designed pen that astronauts could use in space. The difference between this pen and a regular pen is that it uses a special mechanism with a nitrogen pressurized cartridge. This system provides pressure that pushes the ink toward the tip, allowing the pen to work even when upside down, in extreme temperatures, or underwater. Have a good cry. We cry for many reasons: feeling sad, angry, happy, or any other intense emotion. You could even shed a tear when cutting onions, laughing really hard, or receiving a blow to the downstairs area. When we cry, it is usually cathartic, at least, but astronauts don't have that luxury. The lack of gravity in space makes it impossible for tears to fall, so they clump together around the eyeball. Imagine watching an emotional chick flick and dealing with the frustration of getting rid of your big ball of tears, or the awkward moment when you get something stuck in your eye and have a saltwater ball hanging from your eyelashes. So tears in space don't shed. They just form an awkward ball under your eyelids that you have to wipe with a cloth. Go online. The world has become very interconnected because of the internet. Apart from the fact that you can communicate with anyone from anywhere, the internet also has endless entertainment for you when you're bored. And it has become such a popular commodity that it is available on everything from phones to wristwatches and refrigerators. We even have virtual currency now, and the metaverse infrastructure that, when developed, promises to offer us access to virtual cities. Now imagine being cut off from all of this for months. That is what astronauts have to deal with while on their space missions. As widespread as as the internet is, we have not been able to figure out how to make it available in space. Until we figure that out, astronauts have to find other ways to entertain themselves while they're in space. Between doing their research, completing their missions, and navigating life without gravity, they probably don't get bored that often anyway. Use water freely. Water is heavy, so it is often impossible to load large amounts onto spacecraft when astronauts are going to space. This means they have to use water very economically, including drinking water. Even then, the water will likely run out at some point, leaving the astronauts stranded in space. But they do have to pee now and then. So, to solve their water scarcity problem, one of the methods they use to obtain fresh water by distilling their urine. They also sometimes compress humidity in the air for water. It's not a lot, but it is better than dehydrating, right? Drink alcohol. Most things on this list are there because they are either practically impossible to do while you're in space or because they might be harmful to everyone involved. But the alcohol prohibition in space is largely due to political or cultural reasons. One funny incident happened in 1972. That year, alcohol was on the menu for the Skylab 4 mission. However, many people found out about it and got so angry that they sent letters to NASA calling them out for bringing alcohol to a space flight. For most people, knocking back a bottle of beer after a long day is one of life's pleasures. But in his letter, astronaut Edgar G. Robinson said that the astronauts represent a form of purity, and as soon as that purity is tainted with alcohol, people get upset. Aside from the cultural or political implications of alcohol in space, NASA prohibits astronauts and cosmonauts from being intoxicated at takeoff. If driving drunk can get you and other people killed, imagine how bad driving a rocket while drunk can be. Enjoy meals. Even the simple pleasure of enjoying a good meal is not guaranteed in space. On Earth, a well-prepared meal does not just serve the purpose of fueling our bodies. It can be an aesthetically pleasing art form when the meal is prepared to look, smell, and taste incredible. But on the spacecraft, every meal gets delivered in a neat package to keep the astronauts going for the months or weeks they will spend in orbit. However, they can't just dish their meals up, or they'll have to deal with having the meals flying all over the place. So they must get creative about eating, which becomes a chore. Also, because of the lack of gravity, salt and pepper have been banned from space travel to avoid getting into astronauts' eyes, noses, or ears or affecting their machines. Luckily, there are liquid versions that can be used in space. Still, extended periods in space means that fluid moves to astronauts' heads rather than down their legs and arms. Eventually, this makes them lose their sense of taste, meaning that the average astronaut will eventually prefer spicier foods when he lands. Have sex. Sex, while floating around inside a metal can millions of miles away from all the noise and troubles of the Earth, might seem romantic, but it probably won't be a great idea. On Earth, you don't really have to worry about the practicalities of the actual act itself unless you have a physical condition restricting your movement. But in space, it would be complicated to have sex given the lack of gravity and the overwhelming workload, because they are in space for a mission, right? And the lack of privacy. You're not likely to have extra room on a spacecraft to have a quickie. The space station does not admit to knowing about any sex that has happened in space, but it's easy to imagine that sex on space missions is a no-no. Shave regularly. When astronauts spend months in space, they grow hair on several parts of their body. Like us on Earth, their hair growth doesn't stop just because they are in space. But unlike how we can easily shave these annoying hairs off, astronauts find shaving just a bit more challenging, because imagine your hair getting stuck in places that are not wanted, like people's mouths or ears. In space, male and female astronauts can choose between an electric razor or a disposable razor. Most of them choose electric razors because of water scarcity during space travel. To get a haircut, they use hair shavers attached to a vacuum that sucks up all the hair trimmings. Most astronauts like to keep their hair short to avoid complications in the zero-gravity atmosphere. Have a good night's sleep. What do you do when you are tired and sleepy on Earth? You lie down or find a way to relax your body and doze off. But it's not so easy in space. If you find it challenging to get a good night's rest on Earth, you don't want to imagine how much more difficult it is in space. After a long day of doing their jobs, astronauts only want to knock it back for a couple of hours. But without some good old gravity holding them down, the concept of lying down no longer makes sense. This is because the body gets confused when the body posture is not at rest, but the brain is still trying to fall asleep. Some astronauts solve this problem by strapping themselves into sleeping bags, while others turn off the lights and float to sleep. But then they have to deal with the fact that there is no night or day in space, so their body clock gets disrupted. Eat bread. On Earth, where we have an unlimited supply of gravity, bread is a staple in most households. We eat sandwiches, burgers, toast, and other delicious bread meals in different parts of the world. But bread becomes a different game in space because of zero gravity's effect. Bread, crackers, and so on don't do well in space because they are very likely to leave crumbs, which can float around and interfere with important equipment. So astronauts must settle for tortillas instead of bread on all crafts traveling out of orbit to have crumb-free flights. Maybe when we develop bread that doesn't leave crumbs, astronauts can go back to enjoying their sandwiches and hamburgers. Enjoying some beverages. Like bread, beverages like coffee or carbonated drinks are pretty standard parts of our diet on Earth. However, astronauts have to do without these pleasures while in space. Carbonated beverages are off the menu because they are not buoyant in a weightless environment. According to Vicki Cloris, Subsystem Manager for Shuttle and ISS Food Systems and Johnson Space Center and Program Manager for NASA FTCSC, carbonated drinks currently don't make the trip because the carbonation and the soda will not separate in microgravity. Similarly, coffee is off limits because pouring coffee grounds into boiling water without gravity can be complicated. Luckily, a special espresso machine that uses capsules of coffee grounds has been developed for orbiting astronauts. Brush your teeth. One of the most challenging things to do in space is literally one of the easiest things on Earth. Most times we don't even think about brushing. Our default setting is to complete our morning routines, which usually include brushing our teeth. So how do astronauts navigate this journey? First, they attach their toothpaste tube to a nearby wall with a toothpaste in one hand and a drink pouch in the other. Then they squeeze a small bead of water from the pouch while simultaneously gliding their toothbrush over. As the toothbrush sucks the water, they take their toothpaste and repeat the process. They brush their teeth as usual, and when they are done, they squeeze some water over their brush and wipe it off with a towel to clean it. After that, they pack their things and go about their day. Clean yourself and your space. Thinking about washing your hands or taking a hot shower in space? You might have to reconsider. On the spacecraft, astronauts do not shower. Instead, they use liquid soap, water, and rinseless shampoo. To wash, they squeeze liquid soap and water from pouches to their skin. For their hair, they use rinseless soap and some water, then wipe off the excess with a towel. To clean the spacecraft, they use a liquid detergent, disposable plastic gloves, multi-purpose wiping cloths, and a vacuum cleaner. They spray the detergent on the surface they want to clean, wipe with the cloth, and vacuum the dust. When washing with the detergent, they wear disposable plastic gloves. As you can probably tell, there isn't much room for laundry day, so they repeat outfits many times and then wash them in a way that conserves water. Now that you know the craziest things you can't do in space, are you still considering being an astronaut? We sure hope so. Which of these things did you find the weirdest? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Probes, or telescopes like Hubble, and currently the brand new James Webb Space Telescope, offer a unique glimpse into the vastness and beauty of the universe. Occasionally, however, these devices also perceive things that terrify people on Earth. The scary thing about these discoveries is that we can only see them from a distance and can't just travel there and check out exactly what it is that's peculiar in the photos. Dangerous spacewalk. We humans are drawn to space. But why, really? It's damn cold out there, damn dark, and for humans, the cosmos is absolutely deadly within seconds and minutes. Nevertheless, there are rows of people who are willing to risk their lives for a flight to Mars, the Moon, or the ISS. Due to the small number of flights, the probability of being killed during a space mission is certainly far lower than the probability of being knocked down in car traffic, but it still takes courage. One who had the greatest courage of all astronauts was the U.S. astronaut Bruce McCandless. In 1984, as part of the Space Shuttle mission, this man did what no other person had done before him. He let himself be released into space without safety lines and flew freely through the cosmos for a few minutes. Again, thousands of adventurous people on Earth would probably shout, "Yes, I want to do that too." Just like throwing themselves off bridges on rubber ropes or going down Niagara Falls in a rubber dinghy. But this walk was fraught with danger. One wrong move, one small error on the part of the engineering team, or sudden failure of a key space shuttle instrument, and McCandless would have been lost. For the first untethered spacewalk in human history, the astronaut used only a navigation system called the Manned Maneuvering Unit. He used it to navigate back to the shuttle after his walk and flew happily home, going down in NASA history. Marshenge. This formation looks like the remains of a temple complex or sanctuary similar to what Stonehenge must have once been. But this stone circle is not on Earth, it is on Mars. This formation looks so artificial and created by humans or any other living beings that we can sparsely imagine that the formation should be of natural origin. Scientists and amateur astronomers appropriately call the formation Marshenge. A fierce dispute has broken out around this photo because once again, scientists claim that the strictly geometric shape was not built by aliens, while ufologists and amateur astronomers are sure to have found here proof of the existence of an earlier intelligent civilization on Mars. Particularly creepy at the thing is that we on the Earth already do not even know who or how Stonehenge in England was built. The approximately 9,000-year-old monument is a mystery because people of that time had neither the tools nor electricity, roads, wagons, or carts to push stone blocks weighing tons through the area. Who knows, maybe it was Martian men who were responsible for both structures. Carbon cobwebs. 400 light-years from Earth is the nearest carbon star. CW Leonis is at the end of its life and will probably disappear in a few decades or centuries. Currently, the star is completely ejecting its outer layers into the far reaches of space, which in images looks as if giant cobwebs are detaching from the star. Accompanied by orange-red clouds of carbon dust and soot, this star is slowly charring, and many scientists believe that this end scenario of old carbon stars is responsible for life emerging elsewhere. Stars like CW Leonis could be the furnaces that brought carbon into our solar system, allowing life to emerge. ISS at night. The International Space Station orbits at a speed of 8 kilometers per second around the Earth. At this speed, the ISS orbits the Earth in about 90 minutes. In 24 hours, the astronauts on board experience 16 sunrises and sunsets. We humans are creatures of habit, and in space it is all dark all the time anyway. Consequently, the physicians overseeing the project set a very specific sleep and wake rhythm for the astronauts on board. So in the evenings, they also go to sleep on the ISS, then the lights are turned off and life on the ISS returns to rest. Take a look at this photo. If you've seen Alien, you can only think of the fleeing Ripley and the sinister alien lurking everywhere. Creepy, isn't it? Door into the Mars underworld. Was there or is there not life on Mars? Look at this photo and then decide for yourself. This doorway in the Martian rock was discovered by NASA's Curiosity rover in 2022, and the image caused a stir on Earth. Imagine for a moment how Martians secretly go in and out of here. As soon as a probe appears or a telescope is pointed at them, the Martians just disappear through this door, because no one has seen such a Martian yet. Or else, the door is a relic of an old, long-lost culture. Although there are theories even on the part of renowned scientists which say Mars civilizations could have retreated into the underground when it became really uncomfortable on the planet, most scientists wave off. Also, here it is supposed to be only an optical illusion, because what looks like here is a door in Warenhut only somewhat larger than a XXL cat flap. Phantom Galaxy. The James Webb Space Telescope is the new superstar in the world of astronomy and space exploration. The images show old cosmic acquaintances in a whole new light and stunning new details. One of the latest subjects was the galaxy NGC 628, which is about 32 million light-years away from us. This galaxy, shining brightly on a pitch-black background, is also called the Phantom Galaxy. Phantom because it can hardly be seen from Earth with ordinary telescopes. Other galaxies shine brightly throughout, but this one seems potholed, patchy, and yet the galaxy radiates a strange beauty and order. Thanks to James Webb's mid-infrared instrument, the galaxy has now become more clearly and beautifully visible than ever before. Now, by its shape and radiance, it rather resembles a phoenix rising from the darkness with a fiery tail. Mysterious lights on Mars. At the end of 2012, NASA's Curiosity rover took this photo on Mars. Actually, the rover's job is to look for signs of water in the rocks of the red planet. By chance, the rover was looking toward the horizon when it saw this light. Researchers on Earth have been puzzling over what it is ever since. Granted, this thing looks like a flying saucer, and in fact, even NASA researchers admit that the light patterns from this object look unnatural. NASA is able to closely examine light emissions on images like this. Researchers use special instruments that can detect such subtle distinctions in the light waves that they can sometimes figure out what an object is made of just by looking at its glow. But in the case of this object, that was not possible. All attempts to explain the glow have failed, and so we have to ask ourselves if we are really alone in the solar system. Eerie signals. What we cannot see in space, we may be able to hear. In fact, giant radio telescopes often tell researchers more about what's going on in the universe than light can do. Around the clock, all the sounds that hit Earth from the far reaches of the cosmos are recorded and analyzed by computers and scientists. Sometimes these signals are not what emanate from a natural phenomenon like a supernova or a smacking black hole. A few signs are eerie because they briefly howl and then disappear forever. Not so long ago, a fast radio flash was received from the M81 galaxy. Never before have humans received such a howling and shrill signal from the universe. The source could only be roughly located 12 million light-years away. But which cosmic event was responsible for the strangely technical-sounding signal remains a mystery to this day. Andromeda crash. It has long been no secret that the Milky Way will collide with its neighboring galaxy, Andromeda. Although the idea that our galaxy will soon collide with the neighboring galaxy is quite scary, we can breathe a sigh of relief because this event will only take place in about 4 billion years, and the merger will also take another few million years. We don't know exactly what will happen when two galaxies collide. Although researchers observe galaxy mergers in the vastness of the cosmos, we cannot see in detail what happens inside. Thanks to computer simulations, we can now have an approximate view of the event. Slowly, both galaxies will push on each other and will become then one. Whether our solar system will still exist by then and what exactly will happen in our corner of the galaxy is unclear. Tiny blue ball. It was not 1,000 years ago that people thought the Earth was a huge disk, and planets and stars were possibly light sources in a certain space or some kind of vessel. Then, people found out that the Earth is a sphere. Next, astronomers found evidence that stars, the Sun, and other planets do not revolve around the Earth, but that the Earth is a sphere revolving around the Sun. This must have been shocking to people, and Galileo Galilei was imprisoned by the Church for years for claiming that the Earth revolved around the Sun. Then, no one could deny that Galileo was right. But not only that, astronomers of the Middle Ages found out what the planets really were and that the stars were the other suns. As late as the beginning of the 20th century, researchers thought that the Milky Way was all that existed in the universe. The surprise was great when ever-improving telescopes realized the shocking truth. First, another galaxy appeared, then another, and finally, people had to realize that even the massive galaxy in which they live on a tiny little ball is only one of billions of galaxies. For us, the piece of Earth we are standing on, the sky, the vastness to the horizon are huge. This photo was taken by the Cassini spacecraft when it was in orbit around Saturn. Already viewed from one of our closest cosmic neighbors, Earth becomes a tiny glowing dot. Somehow, this image is disturbing, but also beautiful when we consider what beauty and diversity lives and thrives on this little dot in the cosmos. Tell us now how you feel about these photos. Do you find pictures like these disturbing, or do you follow with calm excitement all new discoveries in space, no matter if they can be explained or not? Earth's moon has been its lone satellite for many years, till man launched his first artificial satellite. Surely there have been explorations on the moon by man and machine to uncover the mysteries of the moon. Moonquakes. The moon is getting smaller. Researchers have found that when the crust of our only natural satellite decreases, it tugs on cliff-like fissures on the surface, causing numerous moonquakes. Data on moonquakes collected between 1969 and 1977 by seismic equipment on the Apollo lunar missions were reviewed by scientists. The lunar surface's stair-step cliffs, known as scarps and thrust faults, were mapped using seismic data. This miles-long, dozens of feet high formations may be seen in photographs taken by NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. The researchers found that, as opposed to asteroid collisions or activity occurring deep inside the moon, about 25% of the moonquakes were probably caused by energy released from these faults. Scarps are thought to be no older than 50 million years old and are distributed in a huge global network throughout the surface of the moon, according to the researchers. The moon's crust contracted as the interior of the moon cooled, and this is suggested by the age and location of the scarps. 4 seismometers on the Apollo expedition recorded measurements for the investigation, which examined 28 moonquakes with magnitudes ranging from 2 to 5 on Earth. According to the study, they calculated the epicenters of the earthquakes using new methods and compared those sites to the locations of the scarp in LRO photos. A thrust fault was found to be the source of 8 of the moonquakes because they occurred within 19 miles, 31 kilometers of the fault. The moon was in or close to apogee, the point in its orbit that it is furthest from Earth. For 6 of those earthquakes, a moonquake is more likely to occur during apogee because of the additional gravitational pressures that pull to the moon's crust and thrust faults. Migrating water. It might sound funny that water on the moon migrates as birds do on Earth. One could just imagine the Nile River migrating to Australia during spring and coming back during summer. Here's how it happens. In 2009, water on the moon was found to be frozen in ice thanks to information from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO. The Lyman Alpha Mapping Project, LAMP, a recent modification to the orbiter, has allowed researchers to get a better look at the water on the lunar surface. As the lunar surface warms and cools throughout the day, LAMP has shown that water molecules travel about the moon. Up until lunar noon, when part of the water melts and warms enough to lift into the moon's thin atmosphere, water is attached to the moon's surface. Until it finds a sufficiently cool place, the water floats around for a while before returning to the surface. Two-faced moon. It is common knowledge that the moon has a dark side and its light side as the rays of the sunshine on it. Recent discoveries have shown that the moon also has 2 different structural regions. While the far side crust is thicker and studded with impact craters that lava flows have mostly left undisturbed, the near side crust is smoother and thinner. In a recent publication, researchers used models to investigate potential reasons for the striking variances that have perplexed scientists for decades. They contend that the moon's separated sides could be the result of a large impactor striking it, leaving a crater that spans the entire near side. It would have been later, albeit still very early in the history of our moon, for this near-side, far-side impact to occur. The scientists simulated 360 potential collisions and compared the outcomes to what we now know about the moon. According to that research, a spacecraft 500 to 560 miles, 800 to 900 kilometers across, similar in size to the huge asteroid Ceres, might have accomplished this task. To maintain such close elemental ratios, such an object would have needed to have been formed quite close to the 2 objects that initially collided to form Earth and the Moon. However, scientists speculate that the impact might have formed a crater that covered nearly the whole near side of the Moon and stretched 3,500 miles, 5,600 kilometers, across its surface. Nuking the Moon. A study of lunar research flights, also known as Project A-119, was a top-secret concept created by the U.S. Air Force in 1958. The project's goal was to explode a nuclear weapon on the moon to shed light on some of the puzzles surrounding planetary astronomy and astrogeology. The flash of explosive light might have been dimly visible to anyone on Earth if the explosive device had exploded on the surface rather than in a lunar crater. After the Soviet Union gained an early advantage in the space race, this was intended as a display of strength that may boost home confidence in American capabilities. We sought to place a nuclear weapon on the moon and explode it for scientific measures and other purposes during the very end of the 1970s and the beginning of the 1980s, which was unacceptable to extraterrestrials. Before it reached the moon, they destroyed the weapon. Colonel Dedrickson is one of the several informants who have come forward about extraterrestrial life and have verifiable, respectable, and remarkable backgrounds. He continued, "A spacecraft came to the rescue of Apollo 13, and they accompanied Apollo 13 on their journey around the moon back to Earth," in the same interview. And on 2 occasions, they were prepared to move the crew to their spaceship, but they instead witnessed their safe return to Earth. Black budget programs. A Michigan State University team of economists teamed up with several researchers, including Catherine Austin Fitts, finding trillions of dollars going into black budget programs from housing and DODs. This includes waived and unacknowledged SAPs being funded too from these funds. These programs have traces of undocumented moon expeditions, indicating that certain phenomena have been occurring on the moon that the U.S. government doesn't want the public to know about. Destruction of the U.S. secret lunar base by the UR. WikiLeaks published an intriguing document claiming that the U.S. maintained a secret facility on the moon. Russia supposedly destroyed it later. Many people have speculated for years that something strange has been going on since the early days of space travel. I was researching the WikiLeaks website and I found this information about a secret lunar base that the United States had destroyed in the late 1970s, claimed paranormal researcher Scott Waring. The cable contains only the document's details, but not all of them, because the document was written by hand and was never converted to digital format. How would the US destroy an alien base on Earth's moon without anyone noticing? That is simple. Are you familiar with the Apollo missions? There were planned to be more than 20 missions of this type on the moon, but NASA abruptly halted operations at Apollo 17 to execute some covert black operations involving the recovery of extraterrestrial technology. Waring continued, in 2011, when he posted a dozen movies of the Apollo 20 mission in which he took part, I met a fellow by the name of William Rutledge on YouTube. Near the Delaport crater, there was a joint Russian-American mission to the moon. While on the moon, William and the other astronaut captured their activities on camera, including going on a ship with a cigar form at the Delaport crater. Glass tubes with miniature biped skeletons were found inside, running along the walls. NASA's plan for the moon base. The U.S. government has had plans to publicly build a base. The components of that settlement, known as Artemis Base Camp, include a pressurized rover for long-distance journeys away from the outpost, a pressurized rover for moving suited astronauts around the site, and the surface habitat itself, which can accommodate 4 people at once. A lot of infrastructure is needed for this house away from home, including communications, power, radiation protection, waste disposal, and storage space. According to NASA planners, each of these house comforts is necessary for a continuing human presence on the moon that can be explored and improved upon over the ensuing decades. Mission designers search for locations with easy access to solar power, adequate connection with Earth, and manageable slopes that provide access to neighboring permanently shadowed regions, or PSRs, as they are known in space. Water ice deposits are likely to present in PSRs, according to researchers. That resource might be mined and converted into products we could use, like oxygen, water, and rocket fuel. PSRs are regions near the moon's north and south poles that are extremely frigid, with temperatures ranging from minus 415 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 334 degrees Fahrenheit, and never get direct sunlight as a result, minus 248 to minus 203 degrees Celsius. In front of an audience of more than 30,000 people, President John F. Kennedy discussed the United States mission to the moon 60 years ago. His "We Choose the Moon" speech, which galvanized the country behind a mission that was far from definite, proved to be a turning point in the space program. Kennedy reminded the assembly at Rice University in Houston, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." The Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969 fulfilled the president's commitment to place a man on the moon by the end of the decade. Project Horizon. For the U.S. Army of the future, a lunar base will be crucial. It was March 1959, and Lieutenant General Arthur G. Trudeau, the writer of those words, was tasking Major General John H. Heinrichs, the Army's Chief of Ordnance, to develop a proposal for a manned lunar outpost that would protect potential United States interests on the moon. An odd but true tale that is largely forgotten now is the background to this covert investigation known as Project Horizon and the scheme to land the Army on the moon by 1966. He had been the Army's chief of research and development for a little over a year when Trudeau wrote Heinrichs. Trudeau was known for supporting a powerful national defense and being vehemently anti-communist. He arrived in Germany in 1948 on the same day as the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia, and he quickly realized how vulnerable the Army would be to an assault. After the Korean War, he had also been the chief of Army intelligence. During his 20 months in this post, he was also persuaded that the Soviet Union posed a genuine threat to the United States and that the country needed to adopt a vigorous attitude regarding its missile and weapons programs if it wanted to win the Cold War. Lunar lights. People have been observing strange flashes and other mysterious lights on the surface of the moon for ages. There are several potential reasons, but none of them have been confirmed, including meteors, moonquakes, and UFOs. More information and potentially the solution to the puzzle could be obtained from a new telescope in Spain. The term lunar transient phenomenon can be used to describe brief or persistent light flashes on the moon. The lunar surface has also been observed to sporadically darken in some places. These mysterious lights have been recorded since at least 1787. Astronomer William Herschel saw 3 reddish glowing regions on the moon on April 19 of that year, which he believed to be erupting lunar volcanoes. While circling our natural satellite, Apollo astronauts, notably Michael Collins of Apollo 11, reported witnessing atypically bright regions. Collins informed NASA Mission Control the day before the 1969 moon landing that there is an area that is considerably more illuminated than the surrounding area. It only appears to have a very small degree of fluorescence. There is a crater visible, and the region around it is fairly bright. Chasing shadows. Frank Borman, an astronaut, received orders to go immediately to Houston in the early days of August 1968. I took a T-38 to Houston and entered Deke's workplace. When he requested me to shut the door, I felt something wasn't right, Borman recalled in his 1988 autobiography. Deke Slayton informed him about receiving news from the CIA that the Russians were planning a lunar flyby before the end of the year. We want Apollo 8 to perform a moon orbital flight instead of an Earth orbital flight. We don't have much time left. Yes, said Borman. I later learned that the Soviet Union was much closer than we would have liked to a manned moon trip. A little over a month after our conversation, the Russians launched Zond 5, an unmanned spacecraft, into lunar orbit and brought it back to Earth without incident. The Apollo 8 crew's allegations are the only proof to date that intelligence information regarding the Soviet Union flying people around the moon led NASA to take the risky decision and launch Apollo 8 to the moon first. Numerous analyses of NASA documents revealed that this assertion was false. The decision to send Apollo 8 around the moon was not only audacious, but also logical, as there is strong evidence that NASA officials were principally motivated by the fact that the lunar module for the journey would not be ready, and that there would be little purpose in sending Apollo 8 on any other mission. However, a declassified CIA document that supports Borman's version has recently come to light. It is an October 1968 document detailing the operations of the Foreign Missile and Space Analysis Center, FMSAC, dubbed FORMS, at the time by members of the intelligence community. To enable the CIA to conduct technical studies of foreign, primarily Soviet, missiles and spacecraft, FMSAC was founded in late 1963. In particular, FMSAC excelled at trajectory analysis, which involved using radar and other data to track the movements of foreign missiles and rockets and infer their capabilities from the trajectories they took. The memo provides a broad overview of FMSAC's operations throughout the preceding year.
Why has man not been to the moon for so many years? Since Eugene Cernan left the surface of the moon as leader of the Apollo 17 mission, NASA has persistently refrained from returning. But why? Are the reasons so compelling that they could keep us from our next great space adventure? There has been much speculation as to why NASA has never returned to the moon. Suspicions ranged from aliens to plots at NASA, but hardly anyone had a very simple reason on the screen. The Apollo missions were extremely dangerous. In the 1960s, people were willing to take the risks. The pictures of the moon landings were great. No one on Earth had noticed that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin almost crashed on their approach to the moon. The drama of Apollo 13, on the other hand, was impossible to ignore. For 90 days, 3 astronauts had to endure aboard the cramped and cold landing capsule to return safely to Earth. Long before Armstrong and Aldrin flew to the moon, three astronauts burned up during an exercise in the Apollo 1 space capsule. Flying to the moon is not child's play, even if technologies are far better than in the 1960s or 1980s. After the Apollo program, NASA made a splash with the space shuttles. But that program, too, cost nearly a dozen lives. Challenger and Columbia exploded or crashed on re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Sending people to the moon means risking lives. The race for the moon. The U.S. was shocked when the Soviet Union launched the first satellite, Sputnik 1, in 1957, and the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space in 1961. In the Cold War era, Americans couldn't let that stand. The U.S. government felt obliged to achieve an even greater triumph and was willing to accept all costs and risks. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy unveiled initial plans to put Americans on the moon and appealed to Congress to release the necessary funds. In 1966, NASA received about 4.5% of the total federal budget, 10 times more than today. This additional spending on NASA made possible the moon landing through the Apollo program within 7 years. When voices were raised again in the present day that NASA needed to return to the moon, Congress did not release any more funds. The arguments were that the expenditure had been justified in view of the Cold War race. But sending people to the moon again for billions of dollars for the fun of it, no one saw. All plans for a lunar mission were on hold for years, until Elon Musk and his space company SpaceX came on the scene. Astronomical costs. We don't live in the 60s anymore. While the Kennedy administration budgeted about $7 billion for the Apollo program, comparable missions today would devour over $20 billion. The moon was long considered scientifically exhausted, boring, and not worth the expense. President Richard Nixon expressed serious misgivings about the Apollo project. He saw no reason to return to the moon given the danger and cost, and the program was canceled. The Apollo mission was initially supported by more than 20,000 industrial companies and 400,000 private investors. As public interest waned, the many backers also dropped out. Today, it's even far harder to find sponsors for programs like this. A 2005 NASA report found that it would cost about $104 billion to return to the moon. The U.S. government had more pressing matters at the time and could not get its own people behind a new lunar exploration project. Critics also accuse NASA of being outdated and uneconomical. SpaceX and Elon Musk work much more economically and have programs with reusable rocket parts and sustainable propellants. NASA has slept through this trend and is now happy to use SpaceX's low-cost support. For example, NASA did not build its own new space shuttle. All supply flights to the ISS are flown by SpaceX. The lack of public interest. In 2018, most Americans in a survey said climate-related research was more important than missions to the moon or Mars. In the poll, 72% of respondents said they would prefer that the U.S. maintain its leadership position in space exploration, but only 13% thought sending astronauts to the moon should be a top U.S. priority. Surveys also showed that hardly any kids or young people today dream of becoming astronauts. Instead, kids prefer to state YouTuber or influencer as their career goal in surveys. The fact that the U.S. and NASA will soon resume the moon programs after all is thanks to the entrepreneurial spirit of Elon Musk. Musk's visions excite people, and his Starship will eventually favor a new NASA lunar mission after all. Artemis envisions flying humans to the moon again for the first time, establishing a permanent base on the lunar surface and a base in lunar orbit. Political reasons. NASA is not a free enterprise, but is 100% subordinate to the U.S. government and thus to political interests. In the USA, governments constantly change from Republicans to conservatives and back. Presidents finish after 2 terms, and quite a few only make it through 1 term. Political interests and directions change frequently. NASA programs become campaign issues, and many a president also secures the sympathies of certain constituencies by promising cuts in immense federal spending. NASA is more affected by these sentiments than almost any other U.S. agency. For example, in 2004, George W. Bush gave NASA a mandate to find a replacement for the space shuttle. NASA developed the Constellation program under the Space Exploration Initiative. With this program, NASA could put astronauts on the moon with a rocket and spacecraft known as Ares and Orion. The agency spent $9 billion over 5 years on the space program, but the plan did not materialize. When Barack Obama assumed the presidency, he canceled the program in 2010 because of NASA's inability to estimate the cost of the Constellation program. Protests. In the 1980s, over 500 African Americans gathered at the Kennedy Space Center carrying placards that read, $12 a day to feed an astronaut, we could feed a starving child for 8. By this time, no one was excited about Apollo. Moon landings had become routine, and internal U.S. problems had led to turmoil over every dollar spent on spaceflight. Undoubtedly, the Apollo space program began to divide the American people, and it became an election issue. Those who did not want to lose the African American vote. Apollo 11 was a hoax. In 1976, a man named Bill Kaysing published a pamphlet titled, "We Never Went to the Moon." The former NASA rocket development employee argued that the U.S. never had the technical capability to make a successful trip to the moon and back. Kaysing had helped design the Saturn V rocket engines. Because of the problems he experienced there, the man believed he knew for certain that NASA had never designed a real space shuttle, and that at least the first Apollo landings had been staged fakes. After Kaysing went public, dozens of people allegedly involved in turning movie studios in Hollywood into a moonscape came forward, and Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the third Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins delivered nothing more than a well-rehearsed show. Unreliability of software systems. Can a computer screw up a moon landing? The question seems absurd, but the concerns are real. Yes, it can. Mechanization and automation have advantages, but they also have pitfalls. Airplanes and spacecraft now fly almost fully automatically, and so do rocket launches. NASA's new SLS rocket, for example, experienced a whole host of problems leading up to its first launch due to pure software issues. During an April 2022 test that attempted to fill the rocket with propellant and then empty it, NASA discovered a faulty valve and a hydrogen leak. NASA Inspector General Paul Martin blamed Boeing. Allegedly, Boeing had poorly designed the SLS and the computerized controls were faulty. By the 1960s, technicians had computerized technologies at their disposal, but there was also more manual work. Aldrin and Armstrong, for example, were able to land on the moon in one piece despite the failure of a computerized system, because Aldrin was an excellent pilot and he was able to control the landing capsule manually. The moon is deadly. What do humans want on the moon? Why should we settle and research there, when our own planet offers so many possibilities and above all is more life-friendly? On the moon, no human being can survive even 1 minute without a protective helmet and suit. The breathing air is deadly, the temperatures are freezing cold or too hot. Another problem is the lunar dust. Razor-sharp particles in the fine lunar dust and rocks that have edges like razor blades don't exactly make the moon a puffy, sandy beach pleasure again. The Apollo astronauts noticed this too. The corrosive and poisonous moon dust stuck to their shoes and in every crack of their suits. The zippers of the protective suits had been so badly damaged within a very short time on the moon that the astronauts had to be laboriously peeled out of the suits. Most of the Apollo spacewalkers suffered from a condition called lunar dust allergy. Even technicians who handled the suits and remnants of the dust on Earth became ill. The advantages were missing. Lunar tourism is one thing Elon Musk will make billions from, but NASA has no plans to fly super-rich people to the moon for astronomical sums. NASA's background has always been and continues to be a scientific one. For a long time, the arguments for a return to the moon were lacking. From a scientific point of view, probes and rovers could do the research work much easier and cheaper. That NASA resumed the Artemis program was also because the US government did not want to leave the moon to Musk. Now another reason is emerging to advance the Artemis project. The Chinese have discovered a rare resource on the moon that would enable nuclear fusion and thus clean electricity on Earth. The Chinese already have their own space station, a space shuttle program, and high-powered rockets. A new competition is beginning, and since the moon has been talked about as a resource source, money from industry is flowing again. The reason that the scientific and economic interest was missing comes with it to fall. If we can produce clean energy from raw materials from the moon, the new space programs to the moon could save our Earth. Despite all the doubts and obstacles for years, an unmanned Orion capsule of NASA flew into space again in 2023. In 2028, it is expected to have humans on board for the first time, and NASA astronauts will land on the moon again for the first time with a SpaceX Starship.